Well, Dr. Helm, here we are again,
Well,
riffing while
hello,
black.
Dr. Prince. How are you?
I am doing well. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Well, we have plenty to do. Let me make sure I have my card deck close by so we can make sure we do that. But we have not a series of topics to talk about. And first one, I don't know if we'll spend a lot of time on it, but we're definitely going to spend a little bit on the possible end of the Gaza world between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And then we have the conversation with Ezra Klein and Ta-Nehisi Coates that went on last week. Then we wanted to spend a little more time talking about estranged families because it's something, it's a kind of a thing these days. Increasingly, it seems. If we have time, definitely want to talk about the lack of, sex education in America today. It's a problem.
It's a
It,
problem. Wait, and as somebody who not only wrote a book on human sexuality for high school kids, but also was a human sexuality educator, it ain't got no better.
it's
Mhm.
all right. And then,
Can I? Sorry.
well,
Can
last thing
I?
I'll
Can
say
I
is
tell you? Yeah.
we have a side eye about the troops in Chicago, which I was reminded that's more than a side eye, but we'll definitely talk about it. But you wanted to
Yeah.
get something in.
Well, I just wanted to say, I don't know how you're feeling, but I have to say my mental health has really taken a hit over the last couple of weeks because when other people are in pain and suffering, I feel that, right? And I think there's so much suffering out there. And it just I've fluctuated between being very sad and very angry and there's just a lot going on. It just feels bad all around. Right. Like there's workplace stress and people losing their jobs. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that if anyone else is feeling that way, I'm right with you.
I'm with you, and it makes sense to use this card for the djembe card today because what you're saying, I think, is poignant. And this is our card for today. I'm arriving here feeling blank. I'm
Let's see. Would I say emotionally tired? Emotionally tired. There's just too many negative, destructive things happening. We've talked about this for weeks, you and I, the lack of empathy, caring, and kindness for people. When we get to one of our topics, sort of two men who are in disagreement sitting down talking to one another. I'd like to see more of that. But it's been hard. It's been hard. I see the way that I think that what is happening in our world is going to have long term consequences and generational consequences. And it is hard to keep your head up when you know so many people are suffering. And even if you aren't personally suffering, if you care about other people, you can't help but be impacted by the human suffering around you.
it's one. Thank you for saying that. I really identify with what you're talking about because it does feel really heavy.
Yeah.
I know I'm arriving here with a sense of heaviness, a weightiness. I reflect on last evening. We were honoring the namesake for the education building at the University of Texas. His name is George Sanchez. And he was basically a trailblazer in the education space. He died in 1972, so he's been gone for some time. But just what he did and what he was doing during that time is such a reflection of what we're doing today because to be honest, the weightiness, the heaviness, it makes sense, particularly when Trump was elected. Particularly, a lot of black folks were like, "Well, we good. We tried to tell you." But I think the difference today versus even then, because things haven't gotten better. If anything, for a lot of folks, it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
We've seen the stories of people being kidnapped. We see when it's really literally in your back door
Yeah.
of what feels like the government coming in agitating things. Right, and it's not just a feeling, it's, kind of I think people's account and witnessing of it, and so it feels quite overwhelming, and I was talking to someone yesterday, they're just like, I'm just trying to live life, and I just wanna do it. It's just too overwhelming, and if I think
Yeah.
about it too much, I wanna cry."
Yeah, well, it feels very pandemic-esque, if that's a word, right? Where you're just hit by the number of death and destruction and fear and anxiety and stress and, it's not the same thing, but it's a very similar feeling because you're just you're hit all over and people are struggling. So, every time you go to the grocery, everything is a struggle, and so it's hard. It's hard.
It's hard, and it's struggle because things are more expensive, whether food or other kinds of things. people's business and vitality as far as their job opportunities are limited or have been closed, shut down. I mean, there's so many real life things that are impacting
Healthcare's
people's.
going up if you have healthcare. I mean, it's just,
Yes, if you have it.
if you haven't, we don't do a good job of taking care of one another. I mean, we just don't.
And that has always been the issue. I think, it's great to talk about individualism, but the truth is, most of us don't have the capacity to just take care of ourselves. We need support, encouragement. We need a lifeline.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it's a real thing.
yeah. Not to be
I
a
did want to.
Debbie Downer, but you asked
No, no,
how is
no.
it? Yeah.
I think it's important, very much it's important to call out what the reality of people's lives. And if you don't do that, you're sugarcoating, you're ignoring, you're not actually attuning to where people might be. And so, and if you're not there, cool. But I think there's a good number of people who are.
Yeah. How about you?
But I'm sorry?
How about you? What's your answer?
No, no, I'm sorry. I was reflecting on just, I guess I didn't get to it. I do feel a sense of weightiness.
Mm.
I'm encouraged by a few things here and there. I guess I mentioned the whole thing with Sanchez because at the end of it, people were like, "We got to fight. We gotta work together. We got to collaborate." And so I still feel a sense of weightiness, but I'm maintaining some sense of optimism because I feel like there's a fight, particularly amongst folks who've been through this kind of thing before, even for all of us who've not seen anything like this.
Yeah.
But feeling a sense of, well, we got to get together and do something. So I have both feelings happening at the same time. But thanks for encouraging me to voice that. I do want to just start off by acknowledging someone asked the question, what is this going to do for the Trump presidency if the actual conflict or war between the Israelis and Palestinians in Gaza ends? And I just wanted to give some space to that because if it does happen, it's a big deal.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I don't know, I'm optimistic. There's been a lot of conflict across the country about this war, but my hope is it actually does end because again, what 66,000 Palestinians, 20,000 of them are some children. So it's horrible.
It is
But my
horrible.
hope is
I
that
mean, it's
here we
all
are, two
horrible.
years.
Yeah, it's all horrible, right?
It
Like,
is.
death and destruction and, children dying, their parents die. It's all horrible, right? It's all horrible.
Yeah, and I think just earlier this week we just had the 2-year anniversary. October 7th was the day that the people who were actually at the concert for peace
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
being attacked, which is so horrible. And those individuals are killed on that day. So it's that's horrible. The death since then has been horrible. So, but I just want to acknowledge that because maybe there's something positive out of all this is the end
Fair.
of this destruction. But which one do you want to touch? Well, the other topics we had were sex education, the Ezra Klein and Ta-Nehisi Coates, or the estranged families. Which one do you want to touch first?
Well, why don't we kinda talk a little bit about estranged families and then go back to sort of some of our other topics. Are you okay with that?
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. A strange family. I think that's a great topic. I mean, I'll be honest. What came up for me for that one, the reason I initially thought about this one was because there was a book, and I forget the name of the author, so forgive me. But she, African American woman, who basically is talking about, she's been on the conservative side, and she's kind of going through these steps of how to make your life better. And one of the topics she focuses on is, and this is her perception, that this generation seems to be too easily inclined to cut people off in their family. Right?
Mhm.
They cut them
Mhm.
off because of things they've said, how they behaved. I think her criticism is that the things that people are doing or saying are not, they haven't risen to the threshold for you to cut them off, but people are
Right.
doing it anyhow.
Yeah.
And I only bring it up because I do see I get a sense that there is a challenge that we're dealing with in general. What's your
Yeah.
perspective?
Well, so one of my guilty pleasures is scrolling through TikTok. Often I like things like lighthearted, like dog videos or parodies and things like that. But I did notice a trend of people talking about not only, especially moms who their children have cut them off, but people who have cut off their parents. And it did make me really curious. And, as a therapist, I often talk with my clients sort of about that. And there's some interesting research about it, right? That it is to cut somebody off emotionally, a close family member, is a hard thing to do, and it is not without a cost, right? And I have seen, and I know you've seen, in some situations like abuse or repeated boundary violations or extreme neglect, like there are some legitimate reasons why somebody would cut off a family member. If that relationship is causing you harm and there's no working through it, then that might be a good reason to cut somebody off, right? Um, it's interesting, and I haven't read the book that you have, but in there you say that the author is like, it hasn't risen to the threshold, but the threshold isn't decided by her. The threshold is decided by the people in the relationship. And one of the things that, as somebody who works with people who have a history of abuse and other sort of things, is that is an individual decision to make. And it is grounded in culture and generational values and religious values sometimes and a lot of things. But if a relationship is causing you major harm and but it's something to think about, but there are all kinds of ways to handle it. It does seem like more and more people are cutting family members off, but I can't talk about their reasons. I don't know their reasons. I do know that it is a hard decision to make. So that's my perspective. Yeah.
And I agree with you, and I think sometimes people don't understand that it what may appear like a flippant, kinda like, "Whatever, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna cut these folks out because, you didn't get me the gift I wanted for Christmas." I mean, it sometimes minimized as being trivial, when actually there's a story that's behind that that's actually more
Yeah.
serious because of
Yeah.
something else, and you know what? If it is trivial and people are cutting folks off, I mean, maybe that wasn't a worthwhile relationship in the first place. If you're just, like, cutting people off left and right, I mean I don't know what to say about that if that's really what you're doing. But I think this is the challenge is that particularly, let's just talk about the Black community. I think sometimes there's this sense of undying loyalty and deference, even
Mhm.
when there's abuse
Yeah.
and mistreatment in family relationships, because 'cause they're saying, "Hey, that's my kinfolk, that's my family, that's my whatever," and we tolerate things that we ought not tolerate.
Yeah.
But because
Yeah.
we're family,
Yeah.
we're expected to endure because that's my so and so. And let me just put my bias out there, Dr. Helm. I've been estranged from my father for over 10 years since my mother
Mhm.
passed away. And it's for the reasons that we're talking about here. Not to get into too many personal, but it was those kinds of boundaries that were being
Yeah.
crossed, behavior that was problematic. And it wasn't just a one-time incident, it was a
Of
series
course.
of
Yeah.
incidents, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so I speak from that only as an example, but also the struggle because you have other family members who are saying, "Hey, why don't it's your responsibility to fix this. You need to go fix this." I'm like, "How am I
Right. Well, 'cause,
But
so to your point, and I think this is an important point, right? That one, the relationship between a parent and a child, no matter how old the child is, it is the parent's responsibility early on to build the foundation of the relationship. So that's one, right? And if the parent doesn't do that, right, the kid doesn't owe the parent as they get to be an adult. You don't owe your parent, right? You know, you hopefully respect them, but the house gets built with a strong foundation, right, to handle differences. So that's one. Two, we often don't have the skills, right, to renegotiate relationships, to work through conflicts. Sometimes parents dig in and say, well, I'm right and you're wrong. And as children grow up and become adults, they don't tolerate that well, or giving unsolicited advice or telling, criticizing. And all of those things can cause an estrangement, and it can cause undue damage. So the first thing in any relationship is you got to shut your mouth and listen to the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree and even if you don't like it. It's really hard.
it
My
is.
daughter just told me the other day, she goes, "You are not listening to me." Now, I don't think she ever listens to me, right? And I was just like, I said, "Okay, I'm sorry. Tell me what you want me to know." I'm not always the best listener either, and I have found myself as my kids get older apologizing more and taking responsibility because they see things that I don't see, right? And I'm hopefully modeling that. I don't know.
Well, no, but but I think you're spot on because I think, one, there's generational differences, how our parents came up. There's a lot
Yeah,
of deference out of respect, right? Respect look
you
like
don't
deference.
say.
You
That
don't
is not
y
yeah,
Yeah, right, but a lot of that came out of that slavery mindset of don't question authority because you might die. Right? And here we are in an age where we don't necessarily need to die. I mean, there's still death going on, don't get me wrong, but
for sure.
there's less of it, and we feel like we've carved out a space to have more dialogue, particularly between adults. Not a child who's always a kid, but adult children and their
Yeah,
parents,
yeah,
and being held responsible for things that maybe we did wrong. And parents saying, "You know what? I messed up, and I'm so sorry. I
yeah,
love you so much." And
yeah,
I
because
think that's what children are looking for.
right, and, and there are always 2 sides to every story.
Of
right? There are
course.
2 sides to every story, but I think for parents, we screw things up. We just do. Like, you love your children, you do your best, you don't get it right. I'm already contributing to my baby's therapy fund. You know, I'm sure you're gonna go talk about me. It's okay. It is
Good.
okay, right? Work that out. But, and I don't always think that I'm wrong, but there are times that I am wrong or I get it wrong or I misunderstand. So I always try to work on accepting responsibility for the part that I own because I'm aware that I got one real young teenager and then, two in middle school and I want to have a relationship with them as they become adults, but the work that I'm putting in now matters. But I also don't have to always agree with everything they say, and they don't always have to agree with me. They know me, I know them.
What's up?
They know what's up.
Well, and the last thing I'll say about this is that there was a film that came out, and again, I'm terrible with names of films, but it's a recent one. Let's say
Okay,
2022.
that's
And it's
recent.
really about forgiveness, right? And the story is about a father who basically is this abusive, who's trying his best, right? He's not the worst person in the world, but he's trying his best. He's trying to teach his son how to be a man. But his version of manhood is really fucked up.
Okay.
And so the man, and he abandons him. He has alcohol problems, all kinds of stuff. And so
Yeah,
the son moves on, and he's pretty angry. But the father's like, "Well, will you forgive me? Because I'm not that person anymore. I'm sorry." And the son's like, "Thank you. I forgive you and goodbye."
I mean, yeah,
That happens too, right?
yeah, yeah.
And I think some people have this idea that if you can work through things, then maybe there's a relationship to be had. And
Sometimes
sometimes
there
that's
is.
not the case.
Sometimes it's not. And I think the part of this that we haven't talked about is how painful it is for parents when their children are estranged from them, right? Like,
Yes.
how painful. And, so there is another side of this. Like, that hurts. I have
Yes.
not had it happen to me. I hope it doesn't, but that hurts. Like, that's your baby. Can I mention a sidebar topic that kind of fits in there?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
please.
for anyone listening, used to love Brian McKnight. Oh my goodness. And when I was in college, music, yes. Yes, that. I love Brian McKnight. But of course, his son, Nico, passed away in his early 30s of cancer, and they were still estranged, right? And I just thought to myself, how could you be estranged from the minute and I don't know all the details, it's not my business, but of course, now I'm talking about it, so it's a little bit my business, but, it's kind of like, what would it take? Your baby has cancer, he died, and you still weren't talking to him? Oh my gosh, you would carry that with you for the rest of your life, it's still your child.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was really he was upset with his son. And the son had some of his own frustrations, but it seemed like Brian Knight was kind of like digging in his heels and was like refused to deal with him. And I'm like,
But then
wow,
when you
that's
found out your baby had cancer?
yeah. I just I
I
love
mean,
my babies
nothing
just
what
so
else
much. I
would
couldn't
matter? Nothing would matter. I'd be
nothing.
like, "Okay, I'm wrong, you right, whatever, I am baby." But, so it
But I think what you're highlighting is the different kind of responsibilities parents have versus children. It's not the same.
yeah,
And as a parent, sometimes you gotta take the bullet or whatever you wanna call it and be like, "I don't know what I did. I don't even know what to do. I fucked up."
yeah.
Something.
Something, something. I mean, so there are 2 sides of 2 sides of every story, but relationships are like that plant I have back there, right? You have to water them or they don't grow. Relationships change over time. You have to take care of them or they won't take care of you. And this for parents doesn't change it that you old and tired at the end of your life, right? If you didn't have a good relationship with your children before, on your deathbed, they will not be there. They will not be there in the
Eh
same way.
yeah, it sounds harsh, but it's real.
But
It's
it's
so,
true
so
because
real.
the nature of the relationship doesn't actually change, and, I see this in my clients, right? It doesn't change at the end of life, right? My own father who, he long since passed away, but he had abusive parents. He's like, I'm not a fan of them." Right? I love them, but I don't always like them, and it didn't change as his parents aged. He took care of them, but it was different than I've seen other people how they take care of their parents when they have a close, loving relationship. And, we're not all blessed with that, but
No,
Yeah.
no. Well, I want us to transition to this Ta-Nehisi Coates Ezra Klein because I feel like it's
Yeah.
another conversation that's in the gray. And just to give a little background, Ezra Klein has come out. He had some kind of article, and Ta-Nehisi Coates, who, if you're familiar with him, is a
Yes.
brilliant writer as well. And they're both liberals, right? So
Yes.
that's the tension here. They're both liberals, but Ta-Nehisi Coates had basically been critical of Ezra Klein, basically pointing out there's Ezra Klein is like a lot of white liberals who feel disinclined to have to discount or other people who are so-called on the other side of political or values perspective. Whereas Ta-Nehisi Coates is like, I'm black. One, I've been doing this my whole life. Number two, I can't deal with people who are not going to acknowledge my dignity, who are going to be racist, homophobic, transphobic, sexist, and I'm supposed to have some kind of dialogue with them? Are you crazy? And Ezra Klein being more like, well, that's half of the country. I don't want to, you know,
Mhm.
ignore those individuals. And so there was a lot of response kind of to that kind of debate and the misalignment that I think maybe Ezra Klein had with particularly the experiences of a lot of black folks. I don't know. What
Mhm.
was your sense of things?
So you sent it to me and I didn't watch the whole thing. I got to watch about half. Here's what I liked about it. I liked that they sat down and had a dialogue about it, right? And that is what is not present today at all, right? They did not agree on something and they sat down and they had a dialogue about it. Like they were invited. Coates was invited to sit down and he thanked him in the beginning, right? Like so they could have a conversation. And when you have a conversation with somebody who you don't agree with, sometimes we want to say it's about changing their mind, but really it's about being heard. We are allowed to disagree with one another. Like we all don't agree, right? I tell the couples I work with, y'all ain't always going to agree on stuff. That is okay, but it's really about being heard and
Yes.
having your viewpoint not even necessarily respected, but at least respectfully conveyed so that you
Yes.
can dialogue about it. That is what I call a process issue, right? The process is more important than changing somebody's mind. When you feel heard, you feel like you can collaborate more, right? That you are more together. That's missing from our government. What did our president say that, at Charlie Kirk's memorial that he doesn't, he doesn't wish his enemies well and wants to get his enemies. Yeah. And I just thought, well, so you're not, no surprise, modeling any kind of collaboration whatsoever, which continues this us versus them, which is why we are where we are for many reasons. Okay, many reasons. But it's so discouraging and damaging. We can't talk to each other.
But I love what you're suggesting here is that, for the Trumps of the world, it's about power and control and being able to do what the hell you want with no kind of recourse or help being held accountable. Whereas again, we have two people who are friends, who self-described as being friends, who live in many of the same kind of spaces, probably have a lot of the same friends, and invited each other in a dialogue with not the goal of finding an agreement, but expressing themselves and sharing their thoughts, which is critical because unfortunately, that oftentimes doesn't happen. We're quick to criticize, which is not necessarily the problem, but it's now, and I really love what you're saying. It's acknowledging the dialogue and staying in relationship with one another
Correct.
despite the disagreement we may have.
Yeah. I think Jimmy Kimmel did something similar, right? In his opening dialogue after his show was temporarily removed, where he's sort of inviting dialogue. He's saying, I don't agree with all of these things. What happened is horrible, right? And so it is hard, it is getting harder and harder to listen to people you don't agree with. We make assumptions. I was just riding with my daughter. We were coming back from somewhere and she's like, oh, I can tell how that person voted because this is what's on their car. And I said, you really have to be careful about making an assumption about what type of person this is or how they voted. You don't know anything about them. They are just riding in the car ahead of us, and you wouldn't want it if people did the same thing to you. But that is so happening today. And this us versus them, and it's so damaging.
It is, and one of the things I think was interesting about their dialogue is kind of there was a point, and I forget where it was in the conversation, where Ezra Klein kind of acknowledged he didn't know what else to do. He talked about meditation practices, and a lot of people kind of, kind of dinged him for that because, like, bro, you're gonna meditate about this? Come on. But I think he was being honest about how he's trying to navigate this, and maybe he's maybe not as well equipped as far as how to navigate this situation. I think what Ta-Nehisi Coates kind of laid down was like, look, I'm not going to talk to those people, and I'm okay with that. I don't have any sense of somehow I'm conflicted about that. But I'll talk
Yeah,
to you. I'll talk to my
yeah,
friend who I don't agree with, and we'll have
yeah,
a nice little dialogue, and we'll have maybe a better understanding. And I see where you're coming from. I hope you see where I'm coming from, and maybe that'll add to both our lives. But that was, I mean, I really like how you bring that up because I think that's such a powerful part of this situation we're in today.
and on the other hand, now I'm not gonna contradict myself, but, oftentimes it's about feeling emotionally safe. So if I show up in an environment, I'm the only Black person there, I'm on guard, right? And not always, but I always notice, right? And so you're looking at these 2 men and that right, who there? Who that? Who what? There's one, right? And so it's about emotional safety, psychological safety, and so sometimes these conversations are not safe. Right? Sometimes they're not safe, and so I am not recommending everyone go out there and talk to, somebody who completely disagrees with you, but I'm saying there is no space to do so. And that is what continues to keep repeating the cycle. I don't have the answer on how to fix it, but I know that as long as we are dehumanizing one another, making assumptions about one another, and not talking to one another, things aren't going to get better.
Right. Well, and the thing is, and you and I both know this. If you're going to talk to someone, even if you disagree, have values misalignment, the best way of connecting with someone you may disagree with is finding that commonality, you know? But that oftentimes requires you to be in dialogue or to have a conversation or to keep an open mind and remind yourself of their humanity. I think the other thing here, and I wrote about this in the blog today, is that I want to be in dialogue with these folks who are in the middle, who are not quite sure where they stand, or maybe they have really strong feelings, but they have these other kind of things. But they have a good faith intention to have, I think, honest dialogue. This
Mhm.
other percent of folks who I'll never probably have a conversation with is okay in my mind. And I think that's what Ta-Nehisi Coates was saying. I think it's identifying those individuals, being in conversation with them, and keeping that open. Because I personally think that's the majority of people across this country.
Mhm.
Even if they are still maybe have racist ideas or sexist ideas or have behaving ways that kind of give you this sense that maybe they're that way, but they have a good faith effort of wanting to be in dialogue with you.
Mhm.
And the best way of doing that to me is finding that commonality. Look, we're all Americans. Maybe it's a faith tradition you come from. Maybe you're from the same town. I don't know. But find a commonality and get out there and talk to the folks you think you can. And that's usually my suggestion for folks.
Actually think in all of our topics today, there's a thread of a relational thread, a thread of being connected to other people and really seeing other people as human beings, right? Like when we look at some of the world's worst conflicts, it's because you're not a human being. Therefore, you don't deserve to be here. You don't think like me, look like me, agree with me. Therefore, I can deny your humanity. And to me, that is so dangerous.
It is. It is. I mean, what you're hearing now is a lot of who's American, who's not American, if you're illegal. I mean, we've seen over the last 10 years, for people kind of adjusting to the idea of undocumented. And then all of a sudden, everybody and their mama saying illegal. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
that's, that's
Beings. Yeah,
I'm
human
pulling the
beings.
rest of my hair out over here, Dr. Hill.
We already talked about your hair journey last time.
Well, I want to touch on this sex education, but we have part of me wonders if it would be best for us to move on to the side eye, or should we just talk about sex education, then give a little time to us to the
Listen,
Chicago.
both of these things are ongoing. Our side eye is ongoing, so we could talk about it now or next week, and sex ed, that is ongoing too. So,
Well, I definitely want to give time to the sex ed because of this. I live in the state of Texas, which still has weird rules around exposing children to sex education, as if
even
they're
though
not talking
people in
about it.
Texas are still having sex.
Are they?
Yeah, they are. People are having sex. Yeah, 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 they are.
No, Dr. Helm.
That's what people human beings do.
They do.
They do.
Wow.
In your state, it's happening.
In my state,
In
you
your
sure?
state. Yes, yes, I'm pretty confident. Yes.
Well, you know what Nancy Reagan said back in the day. Just say no. Just say no.
I think she was talking about drugs.
Oh, my bad.
don't think she was talking about sex. I don't think so.
Well, I wanna give sex education more of its due. So let's go to the side eye. Let's talk about
Okay.
Chicago because I wanna hear your perspective because I'm hearing the reason I'm messed up about it because we already heard about what's going on in Portland. That's been
Yeah.
shut down. We're supposed to hear from the courts today about their verdict around that from the judiciary. But our state, our governor here in the state of Texas, Governor Hot Wheels, has decided with pride and whatever to send troops from Texas to Illinois to protect the ICE officers. And I'll be honest, I feel a little, I don't if embarrassed is the right word, but more just like, come on, man, this is the kind of
Well,
bullshit.
again, it's more dangerous, this, right? Like, because the idea was to what, send the National Guard to Chicago to deal with the gang problems? Since when does the National Guard deal with gang problems? Number one. Number two, there were children zip tied in South Shore, which is a neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. They were separated from their parents, right? Elderly people, right? People half dressed, dragged out of their homes. Their homes were broken into, damage done, right? Many of them US citizens, and kept out till 3 o'clock in the morning. And we're supposed to be okay with this? Right? Like,
Mass
what was the
A
purpose of it?
vast majority of them are American
Yes,
citizens, and even
exactly.
if they weren't American citizens, you mean you're gonna bring in Blackhawks
Yeah,
on
yeah.
an apartment
So
complex?
right, I haven't seen the helicopters, but they're around where I work, right? Like, it it I don't even know if it's a side eye because it's
It's
so
more than a side
disturbing.
eye.
Why is the
It's
National Guard in the city of Chicago? And how is it that the president sent them there? What is going on? Right?
And then I guess my frustration amongst the countless ones we can come up with today, there's a part of this community that we live in today that justifies it because there's supposed to be some gangs there, right? Members. There was supposed to be some other illegal behavior that was happening. And so basically, we're basically supposed to tolerate this have at 3 o'clock in the morning, children being mistreated and abused by our government. Oh, well, and yeah, well, and see, to me, this is again, we heard this early on after the election for some black folks because over 90% of black folks, particularly black women, voted for Kamala Harris, and we had somewhat of an uptick amongst black men who voted for Trump, and some said, you know what, we're going to get out of this. But this is the very thing people said from jump why we should stay involved because whether it's directed directly at us because we're immigrants or because we're considered a danger or secondarily for in this example we're talking about they're supposed to be going after gang members but I'm outside with my shirt off in a zip tie. How is that okay? How is you going through the entire apartment complex busting with no warrants and no kind of acknowledgement of who I am? And if I defend myself because I have a gun in my house and I decide, oh, someone's busting up in my house, boom. Now it's my fault, and now I'm dead because they got more firepower. They gotta want to. Well, in my mind, it's like the way they're able to rationalize it, because you think about who's on the camera, right? It's these black and brown people, and then since they're not human, or because they probably broke the law somewhere, all this is justified. No due process, no warrants, no warrants. Yeah. And it's being done by people whose job is not to protect and serve, like law enforcement. It's military people who are trained to fight wars. And so and I'll say this, one of my frustrations, and this is back to a conversation I think we had about meritocracy, right? We always saw that we have people leading like the Secretary of Defense and other departments across the White House that are not qualified, right? But then what we have on top of that is a bunch of undertrained, not well qualified ICE agents who are making buku money with $10,000 what's the word I'm looking for? Bonuses. Yeah, they're getting bonuses, right? And they're hiring I mean, they're literally anyone who wants to come who's had any prior experience in the military or law enforcement. I wouldn't be surprised people leaving their jobs as a police officer in some small town decide to go do this for 6 months or a year or longer underqualified of not if not qualified maybe they have a history of some foul stuff they did and decided let's do this. And the reason why I know that to be true because how they're conducting themselves demonstrates that they yes, yeah. Well, because at what point were as a I mean, first of all, we've had the history as a as a country of doing some really foul stuff, right? But I think we've gone to a point where we are expecting ourselves to behave in a certain way to respect the rights and privileges of people across this country, regardless of their status as a citizen or not. And what we're showing is that that can be basically kicked to the curb anytime they want to. And they're demonstrating that in today's behavior. I'll be honest, I feel like this is my frustration. There's a lot of things that were just what's the phrase they use? It's like it was kind of understood that you wouldn't do certain things. It was kind of like it was just the practices. It wasn't necessarily illegal. It was just like it's kind of like the president sharing, or if you're running for president, sharing your tax returns. It wasn't legally bound to do it, but you did it out of just common courtesy or expectations. And there's a lot of things that are like that in our country. And what we're finding is that at every turn, each of those traditions or expectations are being violated for power, for money, all kinds of stuff. And that's what's so, I think, so deteriorating in my kind of mind about how we state of our country right now. And so you're right. This is more than the side eye. This is all kinds of fuckery. Like for a better, we'll have a segment on fuckery yet. Right, right. Well, we do have a little time. We went straight to side eye and didn't get to a engagement card. So let me pull one out real cool. Here's a good one. This is an engagement card. A time I noticed courage was blank. A time I noticed courage was blank. Do you want to go first? However you want to define it. That's a good, I love that. I love that. I'll be honest. I've seen a pattern lately in the last week or so. It's been I'll call them our seasoned. I don't want to say elderly, but you know what I mean. Folks are older who have been coming out loud and proud, trying to encourage young people to speak up, to stand up, to speak their truth, to figure out how to fight the good fight with all the things that are going on, and using their wisdom and their experiences and their kind of the legacy that maybe they came from as a learning tool and be passionate. I love that because one of the things sometimes don't like about our culture overall is how we kinda discount older folks. If you're, 60, 70, we just kinda, poo-poo, shoo-shoo, and that I guess what I've been noticing of the last, for a long time, but particularly this last week, there's been a number particularly there was a Latina at this event I went to for about, George Sanchez. Tina been in the community for a really long time, and she got up. She about I don't know 5'1", 5'2", but she felt so tall as she spoke about encouraging other folks, and I just love that courage that it takes to do that kind of thing. So let's do one more since we're kind of going out of order. This is our celebration card. This is maybe a little more challenging, but this one is choose a player. You and I are the players. And ask a follow up question from their play. Any follow up questions you want to ask. I have a hot follow-up question for you, because you've talked about your dad on a number of occasions, and I'll be honest, there's a part of me is like, I kinda wish I would have been able to, have met him, um, but well, I guess, what were 1 or 2 qualities about him? And when I mean qualities, I mean things that he used to do or say that just you remember about him that really, kinda stand out for you. Diagram a sense with really? You have a follow-up question? I'm sorry? Sorry, it cut off for a second. So, do you have a question follow-up question for me? I'll be honest, there was a for the last couple of weeks, but at this event as well, there was a number of people who I've been collaborating with who are partners in the work that I've been doing. But when I left the city to go work at National Instruments, they had their DEI program, and now returning to my consulting work, I just haven't seen a lot of these folks. And these are rebel rousers, they're activists, they're people doing, like, tutoring in the schools, they're professors, but I just hadn't come across them. Some of them I used to go to La Raza, roundtables where you get a lot of these leaders, community leaders in the Latino community here, and what's great about being a witness to them because they all knew I wasn't Latino, but they knew I was representing the mayor's office, right? And to see the conflict, but also the love within the Hispanic Latino community was great. But I realized I missed a lot of them, missed just seeing them around, missed their enthusiasm, missed their voices and presence. So it was really nice to see them, and I was really pleased to have some time with them. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, these are people who, for me, they broke things down for me so I could understand why is that a thing? Or why doesn't so and so not get along with this other person? It's like so. Even though I've been in Austin 20 years, I think during that particular time it was important for me to kind of get schooled on a few things, and these folks were good at kind of helping the brother out. Cool. Well, hey, we had a lot of things. We're definitely going to talk about more about sex education. The other thing I think we want to talk about is the whole socializing. People having difficulty being socialized, but we'll talk about those two topics next week. Other than that, it's so good to see you, Dr. Helm. As always, we are riffing while black. Enjoy.